Ladies and gentlemen, EU is a strong supporter of the Summit for Democracy. I am delighted to see that this second summit will take place simultaneously with the 5 co-hosts in Washington, San Jose, Lusaka, Seoul and The Hague. This shows how democracy is a universal value aspired by citizens everywhere, something we should not take for granted. Since the first summit in 2021, the year of action has seen the development of democracy cohorts. Their role is to discuss and deliver concrete achievements based on commitments at the summit. The youth, civic and political engagement cohort is particularly close to my heart. I am delighted that Costa Rica is co-hosting the Summit for Democracy with a focus on youth democratic participation. Recently, we put forward the EU's first ever Youth Action Plan in external action. The Youth Action Plan aims to increase the participation of young people, in particular girls, in policy and decision making. Youth must be represented when decisions affecting them are being made. For this, we are setting up youth sounding boards in our EU delegations. We cannot improve democracy for youth. We need to do it with youth. The Youth Democracy Cohort will introduce their menu of possible commitments for states who wish to enhance youth participation. I would like to congratulate the Youth Democracy Cohort and my co-leads, Costa Rica, Nepal, Ghana, EPD, Africtivistis and IDIN. These commitments were developed through a consultative process involving democracy support, youth-led organizations, and young researchers and citizens. Together with Denmark, we have also engaged to make technology work for democracy and human rights. Team Europe's new joint Tech for Democracy initiative will help the civil society in the Global South to defend and promote democracy in the digital age. I encourage all democracy cohorts to reach out to the Youth Democracy Cohort and join the activities they will be hosting tomorrow morning. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a successful pre-summit event.
Thank you to the Commissioner and again to DG INPA for the support they have provided. I have now the pleasure to kick off the opening session for this event with 3 very distinguished speakers. To begin with Dubravka, the Vice President of the European Commission for Democracy and Demography. She has been responsible for a lot of the deliberative democracy work within the cohort that is leading up to this summit. So she will be able to speak to that, especially because we know the Commissioner as the powerhouse, the brain power behind the Conference on the Future of Europe, which, as we all know, is this exercise to bring citizens from across Europe, all walks of life, together in a deliberative effort to talk about the future of the European Union. We will hear more about it in the intervention by the Vice President. We have with us Kevin Casas-Zamora, the Secretary General of International IDEA, and International IDEA is leading, together with Counterpart International, the Global Democracy Coalition. And finally, we have with us Johnny Walsh online. Johnny Walsh, the Summit for Democracy Coordinator at the National Security Council at the White House in the US, who is also the Deputy Assistant Administrator at USAID. And we all know that the US has been the one that kickstarted the whole summit process upon the initiative of President Biden. So the US, again, of course, will play a leading role in the second summit. So what better person to have address us than Johnny Walsh. Now, a couple of housekeeping messages. We will have to end strictly on time, so we will start with the presentations directly, and we will unfortunately not have time for questions. There is, however, active social media engagement. There are 2 hashtags that are provided through the documentation that was handed to you. So please engage with us both online and offline by either now listening to the presentations or afterwards. Without any further ado, I will hand over to the Vice President for her contribution. Madame Šuica, please go ahead.
Thank you, Sam. Good afternoon to everybody, dear ladies and gentlemen, all of you who gathered here in Brussels, but also my greetings go to those who are online around the world. Thank you for having me today this afternoon, and thank you for your good cooperation, especially to IDEA and Kevin, because I think deliberative democracy is something which is precious and which we, during the conference, which we took from the conference on the future of Europe. So we are now trying to incorporate deliberative democracy into our policy-making process. As you know, we are today because we cannot take democracy for granted. Jutta already said this, and this is something not anymore floscular, not anymore motto, but this is something which is real nowadays. When Putin launched this illegal war of aggression on Ukraine, he did not aim to strengthen our democratic resilience. He did not aim to remind us that the rights, the institutions, the freedom we enjoy in our democracy are precious, but also fragile. Putin did not aim for us to focus on our solidarity and act as one European Union, as one world, united against the bully. The vote in the United Nations General Assembly the other day, last week, is a strong sign of this. Putin is just one of a number of autocratic leaders who take the name of democracy to attack it from within, to drain democratic institutions of their strength and resilience. The reality is that globally, democracy has been in decline for some time, even in those places where we thought it had deep roots. Putin did not aim for us to come together through a unique global platform called the Summit for Democracy. In the lead up of the second Summit for Democracy on the 29th and 30th of March, it is vital that we move forward in our combined efforts to nurture and protect our democracy at all levels. The summit, with its multi-stakeholder platforms and cohorts, bears witness to resilience of democracy and our determination to fight democratic backsliding and authoritarian. We are building international alliances. The European Union has played an active role in the year of action and is co-leading 2 cohorts, as you already know. You already heard my colleague, Commissioner Jutta Urpilainen, who spoke about the youth, civic and political participation cohort. This complements our work on developing a child participation platform, which will enable children across the European Union to participate at all levels in the design of policy. We encourage our youth to reach their potential as agents of change. The other cohort we are co-leading is on deliberative democracy and citizens. It is about assemblies. I'm pleased to be doing this hand in hand with Ireland, a country that is a global inspiration in how it has embedded deliberative democracy in its institutions and its society. Ireland has used deliberative democracy to answer some of its most difficult questions. So when the European Commission launched the cohort with Ireland, we knew we had an opportunity to lead by doing. Is global architecture in deliberative democracy necessary? Well, that is also worth discussing in this Summit for Democracy. Our cohort is not about imposing deliberative democracy. It is about sharing our best practices, our lessons learned from our own endeavors. This cohort works to help governments appreciate the benefits for them and their citizens by getting interested in the process of deliberation, to see deliberation as a means to bring policymaking closer to the needs of citizens. When citizens are part of the policymaking process, this helps to increase trust in the outcomes, the policies, and democratic institutions. Deliberative democracy reinforces representative democracy. We invite governments and authorities at all levels of governance to experiment with these processes, just as we did with the Conference on the Future of Europe, and to embed, where possible, citizen engagement in the policymaking process. In a democracy, our greatest asset is our citizens across all generations. That is why the European Commission has taken deliberate steps to focus on democratic innovation, to strengthen our democratic ecosystem. We have embedded deliberative democracy through creating European citizens panels. On the 24th of February, we marked 1 year since the beginning of this illegal war. I also look at that day as the start of democracy really fighting back. To ensure that democracy and democratic freedoms and values are protected and nurtured, to ensure that an illegal invasion can never be the solution to disagreement or conflict. President von der Leyen has been a consistent leader on this. Just last Friday, here in Brussels, we hosted the second Citizens Panel on virtual words, an outcome of the Conference on the Future of Europe. We invited Ukrainian citizens to come and share their experiences with the 150 randomly selected citizens from across our union. Having experienced the war myself, I was touched by their courage and by their personal stories. They shared their hopes and their dreams to live in a free democratic society. One Ukrainian said that she did not want to leave Ukraine, but she could not be free and under Ukrainian and under Russian rule. Another said, we build peace only through democratic institutions. One of the French citizens, a French lady, offered words of hope in response. Sitting besides a German citizen, this French lady showed how, despite our European history, they were now building a better European Union together, French and German. Our European citizens panels showed that democracy also happens between elections, and we will continue engaging with citizens through a third European citizen panel on learning mobility, which will start next weekend. By engaging with citizens, we are building democratic resilience from within. And this brings me to my last point. In her State of the Union address, President von der Leyen said last September, she announced a defense democracy package. A key pillar will be a legislative proposal, and it includes harmonized measures for interest representation for third countries, to protect the European Union democratic sphere from covert foreign hostile interference. And this is very important. The package will contain measures on inclusive democratic participation and civic engagement. This includes civil society organizations and citizens, as well as measures on secure and resilient elections, including cybersecurity measures in electoral processes. Hostile actors seek to use the institutions on democracy to weaken it from within. Therefore, besides countering the external factors, we must also build our democratic resilience from within. As I already said, in a democracy, our greatest asset is our citizens. I believe that we must invest in fostering active citizenship and democratic participation across all generations. We need to raise awareness about the European civic space that has been evolving. The European Union has created an unprecedented democratic space. It crosses languages, borders, cultures, and histories, and it is a transnational space. We have the moral duty to nurture, protect, and secure this European democratic space. To build democratic resilience from within, we must equip our citizens as they engage in democracy. But we cannot do this alone. We need civil society. You play a vital role in a cohort in the Summit for Democracy. Civil society is a key stakeholder in our democracy. Civil society organizations were a vital bridge between citizens and institutions in the Conference on the Future of Europe. Citizens' engagement is closely linked to civic engagement and the work of civil society organizations. Many of you see deliberative democracy as a necessary complement to tackle the growing detachment of citizens from politics. So we need you here. For this package, we have already organized a focus group with civil society organizations. Now that public consultations and call for evidence on the defense of democracy package is open for feedback until the 13th of April. And I call on all of you who are present today to contribute to this feedback until 13th of April. Dear ladies and gentlemen, to conclude, democracy must remain at the top of our political agenda, especially given our geopolitical reality. We must fully grasp the impact of our democratic actions inside our borders. The manner in which we live our democracy within has both an internal and external impact. Everything we do inside the European Union crucially touches also the external. Nowhere is this more visible than with democracy. The Summit for Democracy and the work of its multi-stakeholder cohort shows us this clearly. I'm convinced that we need to work together more than ever to find solutions to collective problems, both within and across the borders, also with governments, with civil society organizations, with citizens. 2 years ago, we looked on in a horror as the Capitol in Washington, D.C. was attacked. Incredibly, in January this year, the same scenes played out again in Brasilia. These events were physically distant from us in Europe, but we should not assume Europe is immune. We can never take our democracy for granted once again. I insist on this because I myself, as I said last time, I was not born in democracy. So I value the benefits that democracy brings in a particular special way. I wish you interesting discussion today and tomorrow as all of us contribute to the next Summit for Democracy. Democracy, there is nothing better than it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Vice President, for those warm and inspiring words. Let us continue with the second speaker, Secretary General Kevin Casas-Zamora. The floor is yours.
Thank you so very much to all of you for being here. I'm Kevin Casas-Zamora, the Secretary General of International IDEA, and I'm delighted to be here today to open the Global Democracy Forum. I want to begin by welcoming the coalition members and civil society representatives who have joined us in person and also online from all over the world. You are the beating heart of the coalition and vital defenders of democracy in your respective countries and regions. We are very, very glad to have you here with us today. I want to welcome and thank the European Commission, and particularly Commissioner Urpilainen, and of course, Vice President Šuica. It's wonderful to have you here with us. I want to thank the Bosch Foundation also and other donors that made this forum possible. Your support for this initiative in particular, and for a really inclusive discussion about democracy in general, is important and greatly appreciated. And I want to thank the Global Democracy Coalition Steering Group for putting this event together. International IDEA is honored to coordinate the coalition with Counterpart International and in cooperation with Humanity United, Partners Global, DT Institute, Accountability Lab, the Alliance for Vietnam's Democracy, and the Alliance of Democracies. And my dear colleagues, Julia Kudgen and Elisenda Balleste and the teams from International Ideas Europe and North America programs really did an outstanding job leading this complex coordination process to organize the forum. So thank you all. And this is a truly remarkable global cooperation. Since I don't know how many of you know about International IDEA, let me just briefly say that we are an intergovernmental organization with 34 member states from all over the world and a mandate to support democracy globally. We produce comparative, policy-friendly research on electoral processes, constitution building, political participation and representation, as well as the assessment of democratic performance worldwide. And then we use this knowledge to help develop democratic capacity through our programming on the ground. We use our convening ability to build bridges, to enable dialogues and create collaborations such as this one. We're based in Stockholm, but we have 20 offices globally, including one here in Brussels, and we're active in over 60 countries. In these introductory remarks, I want to do two things. First, to outline the rationale behind this event. And second, I want to highlight the important contributions that civil society, including through this coalition, has made to the Summit for Democracy process. A process that I very much hope will continue beyond this year. As most of you know, this is the second Global Democracy Coalition Forum. To those of you who were with us in 2021, this edition will look and feel different. The last forum aimed to provide a platform for a diverse set of non-state actors to contribute to the global democracy debate, in parallel to the official Summit for Democracy. This year, a similar exercise called Partners for Democracy Day will take place immediately before the second summit on the 27th of March. And I hope you will join us then as well. This week's event has been designed by the Coalition Steering Group as a preparatory exercise for the second summit. And there are two overall goals here. The first is to foster joint reflections among the coalition's members from civil society, the multilateral arena, and academia regarding the state of democracy, including progress and challenges since the first summit. The second goal is to generate concrete suggestions and recommendations for the second summit and beyond. More specifically, the discussions that will take place over the next 2 days will have 5 main intentions. First, to analyze how the summit cohorts have fared as a mechanism to sustain ambition and progress. Second, to reflect on the implementation and impact of the Summit for Democracy commitments. Third, to consider the state of democracy broadly and the implications for the future of collective efforts to shore it up. Fourth, to explore ideas and develop recommendations for a post-summit process to maintain the momentum created by this global discussion. And fifth, to enable you to issue your own pledges to support democracy. It is no small assignment, but I'm confident that this group is up to the task. And I am confident because I have proudly watched the growth of the Global Democracy Coalition over less than 2 years into a valuable multi-stakeholder partnership. The coalition now includes almost 100 members from around the world, nearly doubling its numbers in the last year alone. Through regular and constructive engagement with the summit organizers, the coalition has broadened and enriched the global democracy conversation. And here, I also want to thank the US government for being so open to the coalition's input. We are grateful for this demonstration of inclusive democracy in action. Although we at International IDEA are proud to be the facilitators and enablers of the coalition, we recognize that the key strength of this initiative is the diversity of participating civil society groups from all over the world. International IDEA will continue to advocate for civil society voices to be adequately heard in and beyond the summit process. I want to be clear here that civil society engagement is not just nice, it is essential. Civil society has proven to be a critical part of the summit. And allow me to draw attention to two of its contributions. First, civil society has monitored and recommended improvements to government's summit commitments. This is an important accountability function that adds crucial oversight to country pledges. Civil society has played this role at both the national and global levels. Second, civil society has been pivotal in sustaining the ongoing work of the summit process, the democracy cohorts. These cohorts are already producing meaningful results. The youth cohort, referenced by Commissioner Urpilainen, for example, has drafted model commitments to promote youth participation in democracy, which will be launched today. The value of the cohorts is underscored by the fact that some have already committed to continuing their work beyond the second summit. And the success of the cohorts is largely thanks to the tireless effort and energy of civil society groups from the global south and the global north, who co-lead these initiatives alongside governments and international organizations. I do hope that the most inclusive elements of the summit process can be sustained to yield lasting progress for civil society engagement in multilateral and multi-stakeholder efforts to defend and advance democracy. Because just as civil society has been critical for the success of the summit, so too is civil society critical for the success of democracy. The serious and global threats facing democracy today can only be addressed through collective action that puts citizens at the center. As EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said in last year's State of the Union address, referring to the tremendous achievement of the Conference on the Future of Europe, and here I quote, "Democratic institutions most constantly gain and regain the citizens' trust," end of quote. Civil society organizations are a key channel through which democratic institutions can engage with citizens and earn their trust. That channel must be kept open. Let's face it, the more I look around me, the more convinced I become that the drive and the ideas to renew the democratic project are not really coming from governments. They are coming from civil society activists. Now we have, I think, the collective task of protecting and projecting into the future the venue created by the summit to collectively reflect and take action to safeguard democracy. We must preserve it along with all the inclusivity, the sense of urgency, and the willingness to learn from each other that we have mustered to date. This is why we are gathered here today, to say that this process matters to all of us and that civil society must be at the heart of it. So let me leave you with some wishes for this event. In this time of democratic backsliding, may your discussions be forward-looking. In this time of democratic darkness, may your discussions be enlightening. And also, in this time of widespread skepticism that we'll ever be able to build the more inclusive, more sustainable democracies to which we all aspire, may your discussions be hopeful. Every day, civil society organizations, including those here, show through both words and deeds that democracy truly is a universal human aspiration and a human achievement worthy of the work it requires. Thank you all for your contributions to this common endeavor to preserve, protect, sustain, and strengthen democracy. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Kevin Casas-Zamora. We'll now move on to the last speaker of this opening session, who is joining us online. Johnny Walsh, I already introduced him, Summit for Democracy Coordinator at the National Security Council at the White House in the US. Johnny, you're with us. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi, first, could you do me a favor and just confirm that you can hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right, that's perfect. Thank you so much to the Global Democracy Coalition, to International IDEA, to Counterpart International for hosting the DC event, to the whole steering group, all the organizers of this forum. I really regret, not least for my skittishness about tech issues, that I'm not joining you in person right now. I would love to be in that room in Brussels, fully absorbing the entire impact of this event and all the thinking that it will bring. I'm stuck here in Washington a bit. I have a party to plan, but I'm so grateful to how many organizations have tried to help this process and tried to help it get the most mileage it possibly can. So let me just step back and offer a few reflections, very much in keeping with much of what Kevin just said. I would say last year, or end of 2021, at the first Summit for Democracy, of necessity, we put it together fairly quickly. It was in the relative opening months of the Biden administration. And occasionally it was choppy. Occasionally, I think it was very successful. But I think there were two core purposes to doing Summits for Democracy that really abide today. And from my thinking, and at that time I was the USAID lead for it. Now I'm leading for the National Security Council. The first of those things was kind of the same as any summit's main purpose. It's to use the event as a forcing function to get tangible, useful things done. And that certainly applied to the US government, thus the Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal, which I think was a really landmark advance in our democracy assistance programming, thus the country commitments that all participating countries made, thus the democracy cohorts that sprung up after the summit to corral like-minded actors towards concrete actions. And the second purpose, to me anyway, was to galvanize the democratic actors of the world. And that summit happened, this summit happens at a moment of such great peril for democracy, in which we all know the Freedom House statistics. It had become dire, it had become something in our mainstream consciousness, and a summit alone could not reverse the backsliding problem. But we theorized perhaps it could create an organizing feature, a focus point that would broaden the number of people and institutions and organizations and governments who believe that democracy needs to be defended, that it's an emergency, it's under attack, but that we have to come together in a more concerted way. And we cannot let this government, these practices that constitute democracy slip away. And so at times, in the run-up to the first summit, even afterward, I myself on darker days worried we just weren't escaping the phase where this was just some exercise of the Biden administration, well-meaning, a good one, but kind of contained within ourselves. As time has gone on, I really don't worry about that anymore. I really feel kind of amazing oftentimes about how much more widely this process has spread and how much authentic uptake I feel that we've seen from so many others outside of ourselves, outside of a core group of governments. And I see that in the way the cohort stood up, the way so many countries took their summit commitment seriously at the first summit and have a good story to tell now. I see how many governments eagerly assumed roles in support of the summit on their own initiative, how much enthusiasm there was for co-hosts to join us in this second summit. And the stand-up of the Global Democracy Coalition was among the very most heartening developments for me personally, that we, the administration, were not alone in trying to make this Summit for Democracy idea take flight and achieve meaningful good in the world. So I say that, obviously the role of civil society is pivotal to any democracy, a central pillar, perhaps the centermost pillar. Democracy, and certainly this summit process, cannot succeed without organizations like yours in the global north, the global south, working domestically, working across borders, without organizations holding governments accountable, driving innovation, doing the research on which our larger insights are built, doing the actual work of democracy assistance and peace building and anti-corruption, ultimately helping citizens build stronger democracies. And for the GDC specifically, the way it's grown from like 25 to something like 100 organizations, the way it's self-organized, the fact that it's taken on this forum to provide some real intellectual heft to what we do at this summit, how we can make it as good as it can be, the way it's organizing Partners for Democracy Day on March 27th, which from our perspective is all but officially part of the summit, and in which I expect US government and many other governmental officials will be eagerly participating in the events that constitute it. Hopefully a role in the summit itself for the GDC. It all gives me such hope. And it's definitely not the only lens through which civil society participates in the summit, but I think it's so much more than the sum of its parts. So I hope that it's not presumptuous to say that I will be delighted if GDC or many of the component organizations go beyond assisting the summit to make specific pledges and commitments of their own, your own, in the context of the summit. And, you know, it's not, I don't request that to pad our precious event, but it's for the concrete value that commitments from the likes of you bring to the world. And I find, like I said at the very beginning, I find this summit exercise so useful for focusing all of us, absolutely, the US government in that, I include the US government, but that when we weave our commitments all together into a coherent process like this, they become more than the sum of their parts themselves. And I think a huge amount of good has been done by all of us acting collectively and in support of each other with this summit process as a kind of organizing function. I also hope it's not too presumptuous to say that I'll be delighted if the GDC has a life beyond the summit, which Kevin alluded to. I certainly hope it continues to strengthen any and all summit processes that continue after the end of March, but also that it takes on tasks of its own. It's just amazing to have this gathering of North and South and all regions of the world, and I really hope that continues to blossom. So in an attempt to live my belief in the contributions of this group, I truly look forward to hearing the recommendations throughout the event, but especially tomorrow, I'll be here in person for the recommendations on the way forward. I'll be a counterpart, barring any disaster back here. And I commit that I and my colleagues will be doing all possible to integrate the collective thinking of this group into our own deliberations and planning going forward, because we do not have a monopoly on good ideas. There's an understatement for you. And we depend on the experience and the wisdom and the collective brain power of this group to help us get this summit and its legacy right. So the same goes for your feedback on all other parts of the summit, I should say. Tell us when you think we're doing something right or close to right. Absolutely let us have it over the course of this event when we're doing something wrong. Just engage and help us make this exercise as good as it can be in those two goals, getting meaningful work done to support democracy and rallying the world's democratic actors. So in all of that happy talk, I would be remiss, or I feel like I would be letting at least someone down if I didn't say more on what we're planning for the program of the summit itself. I don't want to hold you hostage here forever, but and I could go on forever about what's in the works in the summit, because it's our entire life right now. But I'll single out a few things. First, I think that the 5 co-host model is, to me, the most interesting and valuable innovation compared to how we did the first summit a year ago. Most of you are tracking. We'll be hosting this with Zambia, Costa Rica, the Netherlands, and South Korea. All of them have eagerly embraced this. We will do one day of plenaries, which mostly, though not entirely, will consist of heads of state speaking virtually. And the second day, each of those co-hosts will host major, usually multi-part events in person or hybrid in their own capitals. That, I think, is the second welcome innovation compared to the first summit. We were forced to do everything virtually in the latter days of the pandemic, or seemingly latter days of the pandemic last time. There are so many countries involved, it still didn't seem ripe to gather everyone in a single capital. But I think there's so much more energy from 5 different events on 5 different continents, all gathering multiple stakeholders together, and with a particular, in each case, with a particular focus on a very important pillar of democracy. So you can feel the energy as the US plans its Tech for Democracy event. But as Zambia focuses on elections, Costa Rica on youth participation, the Netherlands on media freedom, and South Korea on anti-corruption, I think you can feel the energy, and it's harnessing communities of practice in each of those areas. Third, I'll single out, this is not a deviation from last time as such, but the US deliverables. We've been hard at work on them. We absolutely hold ourselves to a high standard that if we're going to put this on, we need to come to the table with something meaningful. I mentioned last time we announced the Presidential Initiative for Democratic Renewal. Not everyone has to have gone very deep on that. I'm extremely proud of how that has gone. It was a huge suite of new programs that I think we have a important story to tell about how those announcements of new programs have taken life over the 16 months since the first summit and become real in varying degrees. And they will continue becoming more and more real and making their impact felt out in the world, especially to help us do new kinds of democracy assistance, where maybe what we were doing before hadn't fully kept up with what authoritarians were doing, or the way the need had evolved, the way technology had exploded as a factor in the democracy and authoritarianism story. We will pair that this year with a suite of policy announcements. Our inclination was not so much to pile on new funded programs and endlessly dilute the pot of money, but to pair it with, we hope, equally impactful policy declarations, statements, some of them just ours, some of them multilateral. And you'll hear a lot more about that in days to come. And at the summit, you'll also hear a lot about other countries' commitments, about things the private sectors bring to the table, about things the cohorts can report that they've done or are doing. Fourth point I'd make is that we're really trying to emphasize, as we plan every part of the summit, just platforming what has been accomplished in the last year, elevating what's been accomplished in the last year to kind of show that this has been worth it. So I've named the lines of effort, but we really believe there's a sprawling, complex series of achievements that have come in one way or another out of the summit, and that dovetails with all of the great things that those of you who care about democracy have been doing anyway during this quote unquote year of action. And so we want to highlight that. And then finally, you'll hear a lot from President Biden and others talking about 2 themes in particular. Number one is how democracy is delivering for citizens, certainly material benefits, but also basic dignity, the rule of law, equity and inclusion for all. And then second, you'll hear a lot about how democracy and democracies are solving the defining challenges of our time: climate change, global health, food security, basic literal security. And so there's much more I could say on that. I hope we get to talk about some of it tomorrow, and as we talk about the legacy of the summit and what outlives us. So thank you again. I'm so grateful for you listening to me, for you holding this forum in the first place, and we really will benefit from everything you've done. I'll also single out the Bosch Foundation, as Kevin did, for making this possible in that respect. So back to you all, and thank you again.
Thank you very much. A warm round of applause also for Johnny Walsh. Thank you very much. And that brings us to a conclusion of the opening panel. I want to thank all 3 speakers, Vice President Šuica, Secretary General Kevin Casas-Zamora, and Johnny Walsh of the National Security Council We'll now turn to the next session, which is all about civil society.